My name is Devin Townsend, and I play with myself. And I'm currently in the process of making 4 records under the moniker of the Devin Townsend Project. The first one, Key, spelled K-I, is currently out in stores probably nowhere near you, but you can get it online at my website, HeavyDevy.com, spelled phonetically, HevyDevy.com, or DevinTownsend.com, with an I. My family was quite musical. We had very uncomfortable Christmas rituals in which my grandfather, who was the patriarch of the family, would hammer away relentlessly on an old piano and insist that we all kind of sang. Yet he had no sense of timing, but he was very passionate about what he did. And he instilled in me, initially, my first sense of like, oh, wow, you can be loud. And we played a lot of, Irish music and folk songs and, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, bluegrass, lots of that. And then as I got older, I found that I went to actually see the movie The Dark Crystal when I was about 8 years old. And I think something about the metaphor in that movie affected me really dramatically. Probably instilled some sort of crazy complex that I'm just now getting over. But with that, I really dug the fact that Jim Henson spent so much time creating these environments that, in essence, only 30% of got used, right? Like, he made these huge sound stages strictly for the enjoyment of doing what he did. And I found that when I failed at puppetry, I found that, when we moved to a kind of rough and tumble neighborhood, like, no one wanted to be friends with a guy who smelled like lime armpit deodorant, right, and had a crimp perm. But I learned how to play The Sentinel by Judas Priest, and everybody invited me to the parties, and I like parties. So I found myself learning guitar, and the puppets kind of went to the wayside. But that kind of idea that Jim Henson had done, where he had spent a lot of time and energy doing something for himself that was so, I guess, selfish, in a lot of ways artistically, that he created an environment for the people to participate in that was complete. So if there was something there, like an element of the story, that it was related either thematically or artistically to a bunch of other stuff that he didn't even deem necessary for the film. And I think that when it comes back to music, when I got into Pro Tools and layering and all that sort of thing, I found that, that same sort of thing applied with music. If you spend a lot of time on the smaller elements of it, by the time the big picture comes together, if people choose to focus on one of those small elements, it's related in some way to the big picture. And I think for me, that kind of aesthetic that drew me to, the film elements of it, ultimately drew me to making, various different types of music, and some of it actually sort of complicated. I studied music off and on, but it was mostly in high school, so I can't sight read. And because I'm in this kind of different tuning, I really don't know my notes or my scales, but I've got a pretty good grasp on how the colors and the shapes of phrases relate to how it makes me feel emotionally. So I think that, ultimately the film world was the most directly responsible for what I'm doing now musically. And, a lot of people in the past say, well, you've done Strapping, you've done Devin Townsend Band, Ziltoid, Terria, all these things that are pretty diverse from each other. Like, there's ambient records, and some of it's, actually sort of sensitive and, believe it or not. And I think that when people are confused at that at first, I think to myself, well, look at Steven Spielberg or something. Not that I'm putting myself in that category, because absolutely not. But he's able to do, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then, Schindler's List, and then, Goonies or something, even in an executive producer kind of way. And then as a means to an artistic end, he's able to kind of explore all these different emotional avenues through these different aesthetics. And so I think, because I don't really have vision, I've got the ability to kind of piece these things together musically, and that's just the direction it's taken. King's X, Gretchen Goes Nebraska, absolutely leveled me. Things weren't the same the next day. A group from San Francisco called Grotus absolutely changed my life. Jane's Addiction, when they did Nothing Shocking. Faith No More, around the Angel Dust time. First Fear Factory record. A lot of ambient music, a band, Zoviet France, and an offshoot of that, a guy named Rapoon. I love the Young Gods. Paul Horn, Ravi Shankar, Ween. I really like currently this guy DJ Tiesto. It's like a really fresh listening experience for me because it kind of connects people in terms of a beat, and I think that ultimately this complicated stuff that I tend to kind of spew out, I think the process of why I'm doing this complicated music, hence the third record of this series called Deconstruction, is maybe to get to the root of why I as an artist feel like it's necessary for me to make these complicated statements. And specifically when you hear things that are a lot more, not even subtle, but just a little more look, we want to dance, we want a melody, we want to hear a good voice, we want to hear a good snare drum, go ahead and figure out your secrets to the universe, because ultimately, man, you're never going to figure it out. But if you feel like that's what you're inclined to do, then hey, man, go for it. But we'll be here on the way back, and there's a party if you want to come, right? So I think that now, all these things, and I could go on in terms of bands that have influenced me. It's you got Bark Market, tons of the Cowboy Junkies, the Venga Boys. I love music, right? Stravinsky, right? And I think that, anything that kind of appeals to Tom Waits, God, some of, Mule Variations is just some of the most incredible music I've ever heard in my life, right? And it just makes everything I do seem basically the soundtrack to a nervous breakdown, right? But to have that to kind of bounce it off, you're just well, he's doing his thing. There you go. Just like I'm doing my thing, I'm not him. So this is what my filter brings out, a bunch of weird music, right? But I love it, and I'm doing the best that I can. And so in that way, I feel like a kinship to anybody who's doing that. Whether or not it's that good is totally subjective, right? And yes, I like Yes as well, of course. I like tons of things, man. Jeff Healey.